Good morning. I've just read this book I borrowed from one of my close friends and neighbors, an elder guy who got it in birthday present. It's called On My Watch by Jens Stoltenberg, who's been the NATO General Secretary for about 10 years, from 14 to 24, 25. And I'm not going to talk about the book as such. I'm more going to talk about my impression of what's in it, because it really has nothing that you expect. You know, if you want to open a book about NATO and the General Secretary, you expect to get some insights, some behind closed doors information, some kind of thrill, and to feel the seriousness of NATO as such. I don't like the way this book has been put up, despite all the stars, but that's how it is nowadays. It's easy when you are riding on a wave of you become a leader or something. Everything you do becomes wow, wow, wow in people's populistic eye. And that's why I want to come with this little perspective that this book is missing a lot, both as content and also the way it's set up. Like in the end of the book, um, I'm sure he didn't write it himself. There's always some ghostwriter who's behind the lines, and I hate this because why not show who really wrote it as well? I've done that with my books, and I insisted on these people. Ghostwriters said, no, your name should be also on the title and in the book because this is important. You've been part of this, a long process where you've been editing and working. And that also was motivating for this guy who wrote the book to work harder because suddenly it's just not just the other guy he's expressing, is speaking for, it's also himself. Anyhow, in the end of this book, he starts by telling us the story of Truman and how NATO came. I just saw it. Wow, why didn't this come as a passage in the beginning? He used another passage that really wasn't that thrilling. Anyhow, the book from start to ending has a lot of information, but it's not really information that you would find in a book you've bought for two, 300, 400, let's say $20 or something. Um, it's most of it information you can find online. You can look in newspapers and you can see if you've been following the events, you will recognize most of what has been said. The sense of getting like, okay, what's inside this guy's head? What's happening in the other guy's head? It's really missing. He doesn't really dare tell us a lot about what's going on in the head of Zelensky and Putin and Erdogan and the other people, his own impressions, the culture they're carrying with them into NATO, the problematic aspects of the whole constellation and so on. He mentioned it, of course, but in ways that I think it drowns in the story of always going back to his own family and wife and this and that, driving in the car and the beautiful house. And it's not that well done in my not humble, maybe arrogant opinion, but I have an opinion nonetheless because I've been reading books for a long time and this is not working. And people just want to say, wow, yeah, because he's on the top of something. This where are we in this world? The criticism, the quality we want to get out is lost almost. And if there is criticism, it's just because they want to hit the man and not the ball. So the book is okay. If you don't know anything about the events, you can read it, but you will drown in the scene shifting, and you drown in a lot of long sentences where he says like he want to mention something somebody told him, and it takes half a page to get to the point on what he replied. Okay, I'm not sure the modern reader, neither the older reader, will enjoy it all that much, but mostly and essentially, where is this challenging insight he could have given us? I know he can't reveal secrets, and I know he can't talk about some sensitive issues, but I'm sure he could have said more, and he could have shared a lot more in this book. So it's just waste of paper, mostly. It's not the book that you would sit and find yourself thrilled and see, well, okay, be honest. Say NATO is in this and that problematic situation and tell us why. Go behind the lines, push a little harder, dare to criticize, you're finished, you're off. You can speak your opinion to some certain point. And why doesn't he do that? And that's the problem nowadays with these biographies. People have these gloves on, and they use a lot of words but doesn't tell you anything at all. Anyhow, anyway, there is some good things in the book, of course, and we get an insight on how he traveled with the train to Kiev to meet Zelensky's people and so on. But I really miss that deeper layer of how is his impression, how is NATO's assessment on their part of that. He used third persons to say, yeah, well, Kissinger said he doesn't like, this is one of the best part in the books, and it's kept for under 3 pages, while he uses 10, 11 pages on something else. Oh God, can't you just say it in one sentence on 1 page? Kissinger is a very important man, has been in history, and was until his death as a 100-year-old man. At that time, he uses him in the book, he was 92. And he uses Kissinger basically to say that, well, expansion towards the Baltic is a problem, and expansion further on towards Kiev and getting them into the NATO is a big challenge for Russia, because it's not just Russia's neighbor. It's kind of where Russia is born, says Kissinger to Stoltenberg in this. This is a very strong passage. And the editor and the writer and whoever is behind this guy, they could have used a lot more effort on folding that out and letting him also speak a little bit more. Does he agree with that? Does the people around him agree? He doesn't need to mention name. He could mention statistics and numbers. He could mention assessments within NATO. Who's pushing for that kind of border expansion? Who's not? Maybe he can't reveal everything, but he could reveal from some meetings things that got out anyway, or things that could have gotten out. We needed something more, actually. What's going on with these books nowadays? Everybody writes a book with no content. That's what Cicero said in the beginning of the fall of the Roman Empire. The kids have no manners, and everybody writes a book. And this is where we are at again. Goodbye, new Roman civilization. Maybe in 20 to 50 years, this is not going to hold unless we turn this super tanker. I love the Roman, Greek, and modern European civilization, and I believe in the idea of free will consulting as NATO's basic idea was, and giving the freedoms and so on to people to a certain limit. Of course, we know there is no total freedom nowhere on earth. Especially not today, especially not in the West anymore as it was before. But it's under pressure. The democratic, open society is under pressure. So I expected more, really, of this guy and of the book. And another setup, maybe, that could make it more dramatic without being dramatizing. You can be dramatic in the way you put a book up without dramatizing. And some places, the editor should have insisted of getting him to cut off some things and expand on some others. It needs a sense of politics, of what people wanna listen and hear. But who cares? People buy the book anyway, and they read anything. They swallow anything nowadays, most of the people. And those who criticize, mostly, they have an agenda. They want to go after the man, not the ball. So I put this book up today not to talk about books. I read many books, and I don't know why I don't speak more about them. But it's just like, you get the sense of I wanted to understand really the identity of NATO, where it's heading, and the challenges they've been facing also behind the lines. He mentioned the ambassadors, and how they meet, and he wanted to show unity at one certain point about Turkey and Cyprus agreeing on the on the line of INF and so on at that time with the Russians, to oppose the Russians when they entered Ukraine the first time. And he doesn't really give us that deeper insight, even though he had to reveal some of his personal opinion on people. He does it in a very softish, quiet way with good episodes, like he talked about the Danish Lars Løkke Rasmussen. Oh, I was irritated at the guy. I var irriterad på gutten. Because he took, when they first met Trump, and he started doing that famous session with saying, oh, you 33% of the budget. I like you. My wife like you. Blah blah blah. That guy from the States who's been running things over there, he's mentioning it like that. It's like, okay, this is something we maybe know a bit of from other places, but he mentioned Lars Løkke Rasmussen, the Danish. He said everybody kept quiet, even Erdogan and Theresa May and others. And my eyes were begging them not to speak because we want to get on with this NATO budget expansion. But the small guy from Denmark insisted on taking the word, and I was irritated on the guy. This is a funny moment, and we like it here in the North to read a little bit about that. Why not more of these? Why not more of these anecdotes from like toilet visits where you suddenly felt you stood beside somebody and he said something to you and you answered, you replied, and so on. But more in the deep, where is the anatomy of NATO's identity situation that changes? How did he feel NATO was if you compare it with how he thought it was? He tells us about how he shifted his opinion from the the old social democratic point of view in the 70s, mostly a bit far from the United States and NATO and all that, towards building a bridge so they could like defend their opinion from the inside of NATO, that kind of political cheat that everybody is doing nowadays, where you change your political mind and ideology, but you need to find a way to do it so people who had believed in you in the old version does not lose you underway, or you don't lose their votes, so you can stay on top of the world and get the money. This is selling your soul for the devils, as they say. And I know 99% of people who sits there have sold their souls to something. They know that as well, because nobody can really be honest and true in these positions. The whole world can't be honest and true in any way. It's the natural way of it's realistic politics in other ways. But why couldn't he share some of these insights? Is NATO as strong as we believe? What's his opinion? How did the numbers and the analysis from inside NATO reflect that? Were there anybody who were telling him things about the problems they're facing here and there, or their strength? I know he can't reveal their weaknesses and weak points and all that, but he could, in a very European manner, discuss it more openly, a little bit more. I know there is a limit, there would be a limit, but if we get a sense of what's going on, I would be much more thrilled with the book as well. And and the same goes for his way of like going through the Ukraine crisis. It's attached to his like personal trip more than like stepping a little back and giving us the big view. I would have loved to read this book like in a way that okay, we start with this Truman meeting in the conference room with the 10 members, origin founding members, and from there like set the tone for the book and say, okay, that was NATO then, and where is NATO now? Let me tell you the story. Let me tell you my impression and how I got into it. And what does character have to do with it? Does the personal character of the NATO Secretary General, does it have anything to do with it? He could also talk about these aspects, because we all know that organizations are also led by type of personalities, characters. It's not just a communion of people. It's also the person who can sit and maybe show the way, and his temperament way of doing things. We just have had two Nordic prime ministers going to that post. We had our friend Fogh Rasmussen from Denmark sitting there before, and now we got the Norwegian guy. And so how does that affect NATO? Because before that, you had the Central and Southern Europeans sitting on top. That could be very exciting for people like me to hear about. To see, okay, does that change some things in NATO, that the tone, the temperament, the way you solve? Is there a Scandinavian, Nordic approach that's really good, helping, that could be inspiring? This is what should be in this book. Not so many pages about here and there on the bicycle, and my wife sitting in the car, and I said, and she replied, and okay, you can bring it along, but give us the red line that takes these big issues up. This is a book worth keeping on your shelf. I finished it yesterday. I mean, I used only 1.5 day on it, and it's good. Like an evening and then a morning, and that's it. Because it's predictable. You open a chapter, and you can see through the what you call the skimming of the pages. You can see where it's going, what he's talking about, and it's nothing worth stopping up by. Then you have back to this Kissinger phrase. You have this Kissinger phrase. It's very important. Kissinger have had really deep opinion on many things that people and politicians doesn't really listen to. Everybody respects him, but he died really not always having this adherence to his opinions as they should be. I'm not saying it should be the one old guy who dominates the whole direction, because he's a knowledgeable old guy. But I'm saying he has opinions. He's not been really be really listened to, and deep ones. Lately on the AI question. If you look on the net, one of the last interviews with Kissinger, he said this is the biggest challenge, also more than atom war, even though his own thesis was on the atom weapons and retaliation processes and whatever he wrote back in the 70s. Um, so I miss a lot in this book of historical values. He could have combined the now with the past on each chapter, and he could give us an outline on where he thinks this is headed, honestly. Because he can say his own opinion on some issues. Say, I think this is headed toward a long drawn conflict, or it's ending soon, or this and that, and most essentially will give us what's the difference in NATO, in the personalities running NATO, in the where did things fail for him underway. It's all about, I sat on the top of the table, and now they could see that I could put the hammer, and then now they listened, and it goes so quickly over, and say, okay, yeah, congratulations, you're on the top of the table, mister. But really, show us more deep that where did you fail? Where have been some challenges where things really, really went awry and didn't work? Yeah. So some of the very funny passages is the one with I mentioned with Lars Løkke Rasmussen from Denmark, and the one with Kissinger is not funny, but it's good. It's important. This small dialogue he had there. I missed a lot more of these in the book, because I think he could have reflected many more opinions that way, also his own opinions that he can't say, than we actually get to know. Most of the book is just kind of rewriting of last 10 years newspaper clippings or whatever. It's like, yeah, and this happened, and this happened, then we arrived and we talked, and then he left, and then this and this and this happened. uh, what did you talk about? What happened? Why did Putin say that to you? How did you feel when he said that to you? He said, yeah, go back to being Prime Minister of Norway. It's better for you and NATO. It was a very, very tough personal comment he gave him there, Putin, on his way out from some conference. What did you feel? How did you react? Did anybody hear it? And why do you think he said it? These things can give us the thrill of following the big leaders and their positions on this and that in the world, and so on. So I was been missing a lot in this book. And last funny one is yeah, what was it? Yeah, yeah, it's the guy from Luxembourg who said to Putin, you know why we never gonna invade you? And it's a silly joke actually, and a little bit out of context, but well, he uses it anyway. So the idea is good, and surely the editor and the people who wrote this book for him, they were trying to imitate some of the great books that have been written on biographies, bringing out these elements, both the personal, the very hard situations, the insight behind closed doors, where we hear a little bit of the dialogue, the minds of the ones sitting there, their attitudes. This is what I want to read a book for. Why do I want to read a book that's like just opening 10 past years of headlines of what happened in Kiev and what happened. He's not putting it that way, of course. It's personal. He's speaking about his trip with that book. Of course, I'm not saying this is headline, but it feels like that because it's missing all those elements that gives us the special touch. His inner mind, his inner thoughts, as I said before, the essentials of what NATO is and what about the characters leading it, and would there be a difference in it needed a good questioner to bring all this out in him. And so, yeah. Well, what does he care? He's gonna die with 5 stars on that fucking book. Anyway, this is what I hate about the world of today, actually. What's going on with all these politicians and leaders? But they always reflect the people. All of us get the leaders we deserve. Goodbye.